Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at how the Sunshine State is gearing up for America's massive 250th anniversary. So, the calendar is turning toward May 2026, and the semi-quincentennial, yeah, it's a mouthful, but it is officially in full swing. Now, if you thought Florida was a busy destination during, say, your standard spring break, well, the state is preparing an absolutely monumental birthday party that's going to completely blow those crowds out of the water. We're going to dive into exactly how Florida is putting its own, frankly, incredibly unique, high-tech, and kind of quirky spin on this whole nationwide celebration.
And because while the entire country is, obviously getting ready for the 250th, Florida's approach starts with a really fascinating historical twist. I mean, usually when we think of 1776, our minds go straight to the classics, right? Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C. But Florida's starting line for this whole thing is completely different, and that's exactly what makes their massive investment in this celebration so interesting for us to analyze.
Think about it. The original 13 colonies were the ones actually fighting for independence. But back in 1776, Florida, they weren't one of those original colonies at all. They were actually a stronghold flying the British flag. Literally, they were British loyalists. So you really have to wonder, how does a state that was technically rooting for the other team back in the 18th century somehow become the modern-day epicenter of America's big birthday bash? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
So here's our quick agenda for this thematic tour across the state. We'll start with that surprising loyalist history, then look at Disney's nostalgic celebration, contrast that with Universal's futuristic patriotism, check out some nature, wildlife, and brews, dive into Tampa's local Liberty events, and wrap it all up with what we're calling the Florida Formula. All right, starting off with Section 1, a surprising loyalist history and its 1776 origins. Our first stop really grounds us in the actual reality of what Florida was like in 1776. To honestly honor its history, historic spots like St. Augustine are leaning right into their loyalist past. They're literally flying the British flag as a reminder of the state's contrarian origins. It's a surprisingly honest nod to the past, but while St. Augustine provides this quiet, historically accurate reflection, the rest of the state, yeah, they're taking those contrarian origins and using them as an excuse to throw an aggressively modern, absolutely massive party. Which leads us right into Section 2, Disney's nostalgic celebration, where they are definitely looking back. If you want to see how this history translates to the major theme parks, you got to start with Disney. They are leaning heavily on nationwide nostalgia for their Disney Celebrates America campaign. For instance, Soaring Across America officially opens at Epcot on May 26th. And they're not just recycling old video here, they went out and captured brand new 16K drone footage for a coast-to-coast virtual flight that ends with this massive fireworks display right over the National Mall. And beyond the rides, over at the Magic Kingdom, they're extending a really moving veteran tribute called Portraits of Courage. Plus, if you can't actually make it to the parks, they're doing a 24-hour live broadcast on ABC on July 4th that you can just stream from your couch on Disney+. So overall, it's a very sweeping, very emotional, and backward-looking tribute to the nation's history.
But then we hit Section 3, Universal's futuristic patriotism, where they are entirely focused on looking forward.
Over at Universal, they're taking a completely, almost starkly different approach. Their whole strategy right now revolves around becoming the new American theme park. So while Disney is looking backward at the past 250 years, Universal is all about what's next. They are leaning so hard into the future, basically using the massive momentum of this 250th anniversary to push the narrative of their upcoming epic universe. They want to be seen unequivocally as the theme park of tomorrow.
And Universal's version of patriotism, it is entirely superhero-themed. They're focusing heavily on Marvel Superhero Island, basically turning Captain America into their official mascot for the 250th. They've even added a brand new Patriots Parade rolling right through Islands of Adventure. And meanwhile, all around you, there's just heavy construction. Walls up everywhere around the Lost Continent, which is a huge signal that Epic Universe is right around the corner. It's such a brilliant contrast, honestly. Disney gives you this sentimental, reflective history, and Universal hands you this high-octane, comic book vision of the future.
Okay, let's shift gears for Section 4, Nature, Wildlife, and Brews. Basically, natural America. When you step away from the massive corporate narratives of Disney and Universal, you find a totally different, much more relaxed vibe. On one hand, you've got SeaWorld Orlando focusing their energy on a massive, highly meaningful conservation project dedicated to the American bald eagle. It's just a very grounded, wildlife-centric way to honor the ultimate symbol of the nation. But then, on the other hand, you've got Busch Gardens Tampa taking a slightly more, let's call it celebratory route.
they're expanding their Red, White, and Brews festival to basically twice its normal size for the anniversary.
And I love this. Busch Gardens is using a really clever metric for their festival: 250. They are perfectly tying into the semi-quintennial by bringing in exactly 250 local Florida craft beers for visitors. It's fantastic, it's a little bit humorous, but honestly, it's a very practical way to celebrate a 250-year milestone. Talk about some seriously thorough and delicious local research, right?
That brings us to Section 5, Tampa's local liberty and their civic celebrations.
To get a feel for what civic communities are doing totally outside the theme park bubbles, we can trace a timeline straight from that historical foundation in 1776, right through those big theme park launches in May 2026, all the way to the pinnacle date, July 4, 2026, because that is when Mayor Jane Castor has announced Tampa's massive Liberty by the Bay event to officially cap off the summer.
And this event, it just brilliantly illustrates Florida's distinct brand of quirkiness. Picture this. You've got a highly sophisticated 250 drone light show buzzing over the Hillsborough River, perfectly synced up to a massive fireworks display at Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. Okay, so that's the high-tech part. But then they're pairing that with a patriotic pet show featuring golden retrievers parading around in 18th century powdered wigs. I mean, it perfectly captures a celebration that totally refuses to take itself too seriously while still putting on an incredibly impressive show.
Finally, Section 6, the Florida Formula, where history essentially meets high-tech.
All of these incredibly diverse, kind of wild celebrations bring us to a critical question. With this messy, loud, and frankly massive celebration happening across the entire state, you've got to ask yourself, is Florida actually doing it better than the traditional historical heavyweights? I mean, better than Philadelphia or Washington, D.C., because those cities have the actual cobblestone streets where the history went down. But Florida has brought something entirely different to the table.
And the answer really seems to lie in this unique blend, mixing history with high-tech. That right there is the Florida formula. It is a resounding success specifically because it doesn't just do one thing. It blends historical anomalies, like casually reminding everyone with British flags in St. Augustine that Florida wasn't even part of the original 13, with cutting-edge space-age entertainment. You literally have the Kennedy Space Center hosting America's future exhibits right next to 16K drone flights, next to superhero parades, next to 250 craft beers. It is loud, it is delightfully messy, and it is unapologetically Florida. They've taken a standard historical milestone and completely transformed it into this forward-looking spectacle.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. When it comes to marking a monumental quarter millennium, what's actually the best way to do it? Does true celebration lie in the quiet, reflective accuracy of our past, walking the actual historical sites? Or is it found in the roaring thrills of a roller coaster, 16K drone shows, and golden retrievers running around in powdered wigs? How do you prefer to celebrate history? Take a second to think about that. Thank you so much for joining me as we explored this fascinating topic today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.